Do you want to successfully complete the D101 Objective Assessment exam? Then you are in the right place. Our website provides a list of questions and answers for your success in the D101 OA exam for free. We understand that acing your OA exam can be quite challenging. That's why we provide completely free exam guides and practice questions for you. In this video, we will cover questions from costing systems, cost allocation, cost volume profit, cost classification, and overhead accounting. So let's get started. 1. What is a common basis for allocating manufacturing overhead in a traditional costing system? A. Number of units produced. B. Direct labour hours. C. Direct materials used. D. Sales volume. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, B. Direct labour hours. Explanation. Option B is correct because in traditional costing, companies often need a simple way to spread out their general factory costs, manufacturing overhead, like factory rent or electricity, to the products they make. A common way to do this is to use direct labour hours, how many hours people work directly on making the products. The idea is that the more labour hours a product takes, the more overhead it should get a share of. Option A is less common or less appropriate for traditional overhead allocation. Option C is incorrect because it is less common or less appropriate for traditional overhead allocation. Option D is incorrect because it is less common or less appropriate. 2. In an activity-based costing system, what are the factors that cause overhead costs called? A. Cost objects. B. Cost drivers. C. Cost pools. D. Conversion costs. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, B. Cost drivers. Explanation. Option B is correct because in activity-based costing, a cost driver is something that actually makes a particular overhead cost go up or down. Option A is incorrect because cost objects are the things you want to find the cost of, like a product. Option C is incorrect because cost pools are groups of similar overhead costs. Option D is incorrect because conversion costs are direct labour plus manufacturing overhead. 3. What does activity-based costing take into account that traditional costing does not? A. Only direct labour. B. Both direct and indirect costs. C. Non-manufacturing costs. D. Only conversion costs. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer, C. Non-manufacturing costs. Explanation. Option C is correct because although activity-based costing is primarily focused on more accurately allocating manufacturing overhead, the principles of activity-based costing can also be extended to assign non-manufacturing costs like selling and administrative costs to products or customers if those activities drive those costs. Traditional costing usually just focuses on allocating manufacturing overhead to products and treats non-manufacturing costs as period expenses not assigned to products. Option A is incorrect because both systems consider direct labour. Option B is incorrect because traditional costing considers direct and allocates indirect manufacturing costs. Option D is incorrect because it is too narrow a focus. 4. How is overhead applied in an activity-based costing system? A. Based on a single measure of activity. B. Equally among all products. C. Using multiple cost drivers. D. Based on material cost. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, C. Using multiple cost drivers. Explanation. Option C is correct because activity-based costing is different from traditional costing. Instead of using just one general way to spread out all overhead costs, ABC first groups overhead costs into different activities. Then for each activity, it finds a specific cost driver and uses that driver to assign a share of that activity's cost to products. So it uses multiple cost drivers, one for each activity. Option A is incorrect because it describes traditional costing, where a single measure like direct labour hours is used to allocate overhead. Option B is incorrect because activity-based costing aims to allocate costs more accurately based on activities, not equally among all products. Option D is incorrect because activity-based costing focuses on activities that drive costs, which are more diverse than just material cost. 5. In a cost volume profit graph, what does the vertical intercept of the total cost line represent? A. Total fixed costs. B. Total variable costs. C. Total contribution margin. D. Sales revenue. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, A. Total fixed costs. Explanation option A is correct, because a cost volume profit graph shows how costs and profits change as the number of units sold changes. The total cost line on this graph starts at a certain point on the vertical cost axis, even when 0 units are produced. That starting point represents the company's total fixed costs. Option B is incorrect because total variable costs are costs that change with the level of production and are represented by the slope of the total cost line. Option C is incorrect because total contribution margin is the difference between total revenue and total variable costs. Option D is incorrect because sales revenue is represented by a separate line on the cost volume profit graph. 6. Which costs are included in the calculation of conversion costs? A. Direct materials and direct labour. B. Manufacturing overhead and direct labour. C. Direct materials and indirect labour. D. Manufacturing overhead and direct materials. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. B. Manufacturing overhead and direct labour. Explanation. Option B is correct because conversion costs are the costs a manufacturing company spends to convert raw materials into finished products, including direct labour and manufacturing overhead. Option A is incorrect because direct materials are considered prime costs, not conversion costs. Option C is incorrect because while indirect labour is part of overhead, direct materials are not part of conversion costs. Option D is incorrect because direct materials are prime costs, not conversion costs. Manufacturing overhead is included in conversion costs, but needs to be paired with direct labour. 7. What does margin of safety represent in cost volume profit analysis? A. The percentage of sales above break-even. B. The contribution margin per unit. C. Total fixed costs. D. The break-even point. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. A. The percentage of sales above break-even. Explanation. Option A is correct because the margin of safety is a measure of how much cushion a company has before it starts losing money. It is the difference between the company's actual or expected sales and its break-even sales. Option B is incorrect because the contribution margin per unit represents the revenue remaining after deducting the variable costs of a product or service. Option C is incorrect because total fixed costs are the expenses that do not change in proportion to activity volume. Option D is incorrect because the break-even point is the level of sales at which total revenues equal total costs. 8. Which account is credited when manufacturing overhead is applied to work in process? A. Raw materials inventory. B. Work in process inventory. C. Finished goods inventory. D. Manufacturing overhead. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer, D. Manufacturing overhead. Explanation. Option D is correct because manufacturing overhead is credited to show that overhead costs are being applied to work in process. This account acts as a temporary holding account for actual and applied overhead costs. Option A is incorrect because raw materials inventory is debited when raw materials are purchased and credited when they are used in production. Option B is incorrect because work in process inventory is debited when manufacturing overhead is applied, not credited. Option C is incorrect because finished goods inventory is debited when goods are completed and transferred out of work in process, not when overhead is applied. 9. What is the formula for calculating contribution margin? A. Sales revenue minus variable costs. B. Fixed costs minus variable costs. C. Sales revenue divided by fixed costs. D. Total costs minus sales revenue. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, AA. Sales revenue minus variable costs. Explanation. Option A is correct because the contribution margin is the amount of money left over from sales revenue after paying variable costs. This contribution helps cover fixed costs, and the remainder is profit. Contribution margin equals sales revenue minus variable costs. Option B is incorrect because fixed costs minus variable costs does not represent the contribution margin. It doesn't directly relate to revenue. Option C is incorrect because sales revenue divided by fixed costs gives a ratio, not the contribution margin, which is a dollar amount. Option D is incorrect because total costs minus sales revenue calculates profit or loss, not the contribution margin. What is the definition of break-even sales in units? A. Total fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. B. Sales price per unit multiplied by total units. C. Total fixed costs multiplied by total units sold. D. Total sales revenue divided by variable cost per unit. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, A. Total fixed costs divided by contribution margin per unit. Explanation. Option A is correct because the break-even point in units is the number of products a company needs to sell, so that its total revenue exactly equals its total costs, resulting in zero profit and zero loss. The formula to find this is total fixed costs divided by contribution margin per unit. Option B is incorrect because this calculation results in total sales revenue, not the break-even point. Option C is incorrect because this formula is not used in break-even analysis and does not provide a meaningful financial metric. Option D is incorrect because this formula does not relate to the break-even point and does not account for fixed costs. 11. Which type of costing method is most appropriate for industries with identical or homogeneous products? A. Job order costing. B. Process costing. C. Activity-based costing. D. Absorption costing. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer, B. Process costing. Explanation. Option B is correct because process costing is a method used by companies that make huge quantities of the exact same or very similar products in a continuous flow, like cans of soda, boxes of cereal, or gallons of paint. In this system, costs are collected for each production process or department and then averaged over all the identical units produced during a period. Option A is incorrect because job order costing is used for unique or custom products, not homogeneous products. Option C is incorrect because activity-based costing is a more detailed way to assign overhead costs, and it is not specific to homogeneous products. Option D is incorrect because absorption costing is a general costing approach that includes fixed overhead in product costs, and both job order and process costing can be absorption costing methods. 12. What is the primary difference between job order costing and process costing? A. Process costing tracks costs for each individual job. B. Job order costing averages costs over all units produced. C. Process costing averages costs over a continuous flow of units. D. Job order costing is only used for large production runs. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, C. Process costing averages costs over a continuous flow of units. Explanation. Option C is correct because the core difference lies in how costs are collected and assigned. Process costing is used for mass production of identical items in a continuous flow, averaging costs over all units. Option A is incorrect because job order costing, not process costing, tracks costs for each individual job. Option B is incorrect because process costing, not job order costing, averages costs over all units produced. Option D is incorrect because job order costing is used for unique or small batch jobs, not large production runs. 13. Which of the following is considered a facility-level cost in an activity-based costing system? A. Direct labour. B. Machine setup. C. Factory security. D. Quality inspections. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer, C. Factory security. Explanation. Option C is correct because in activity-based costing, costs are grouped into different levels based on what causes them. Facility-level costs are needed to support the entire factory or production facility and don't change based on how many different products are made, batches are run, or units are produced. Factory security is an example. Option A is incorrect because direct labour costs are directly tied to the production of specific goods or services, varying with production volume. Option B is incorrect because machine setup costs are incurred each time a batch of products is prepared for production, thus varying with the number of batches. Option D is incorrect because quality inspection costs are often related to specific products or batches, not the entire facility. 14. What is the cost object in an activity-based costing system? A. A product or service. B. Overhead. C. Direct labour. D. Fixed costs. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, A. A product or service. Explanation. Option A is correct because a cost object is anything for which you want to measure or assign costs. In activity-based costing, while you are trying to assign overhead costs more accurately, the ultimate goal is usually to find out the cost of a specific product, service, customer, or project. So these products, services, etc. are the cost objects. Option B is incorrect because overhead is what's being allocated to the cost object. Option C is incorrect because direct labour is a direct cost, often traced directly to the cost object. Option D is incorrect because fixed costs are a type of cost, not the cost object itself. 15. Which cost is considered a direct cost in a manufacturing environment? A. Factory rent. B. Indirect labour. C. Direct materials. D. Utilities. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, C. Direct materials. Explanation: option C is correct because a direct cost in manufacturing is a cost that can be easily and directly traced or linked to a specific product being made. Direct materials are the raw materials or components that become an actual physical part of the finished product. Option A is incorrect because factory rent is an overhead cost allocated across all products, not directly traceable to one. Option B is incorrect because indirect labour supports production, but isn't directly involved in creating a specific product. Option D is incorrect because utilities support the entire manufacturing process, not a single product. (16) What is the purpose of cost drivers in an ABC system? A. To allocate direct materials. B. To allocate direct labour. C. To allocate overhead costs. D. To allocate selling expenses. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer, C. To allocate overhead costs. Explanation: option C is correct because in activity-based costing, cost drivers are the activities or factors that cause manufacturing overhead costs. ABC tries to find a cause and effect relationship to allocate overhead costs from activity cost pools accurately to the products or services that use those activities. Option A is incorrect because direct materials are direct costs, usually traced directly, and not allocated using ABC drivers. Option B is incorrect because direct labour is a direct cost, usually traced directly, and not allocated using ABC drivers. Option D is incorrect because while ABC can be extended to selling expenses, its primary focus is manufacturing overhead. (17) Which of the following statements is true regarding activity-based costing? A. It assigns all overhead costs equally across all products. B. It considers only direct costs when assigning overhead. C. It assigns overhead based on actual activities performed. D. It does not account for non-manufacturing costs. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, C. It assigns overhead based on actual activities performed. Explanation: option C is correct because activity-based costing is a more detailed way to assign overhead costs by identifying different activities that cause overhead costs and assigning the costs of these activities to products based on how much each product actually uses or consumes those activities. Option A is incorrect because assigning all overhead costs equally is a simple and often inaccurate allocation method. Option B is incorrect because activity-based costing is all about allocating indirect overhead costs, not direct costs. Option D is incorrect because activity-based costing principles can be applied to non-manufacturing costs for things like customer profitability analysis. 18. What is the predetermined overhead rate formula? A. Estimated manufacturing overhead divided by expected sales. B. Actual manufacturing overhead divided by actual machine hours. C. Estimated manufacturing overhead divided by expected operating activity. D. Actual manufacturing overhead divided by estimated machine hours. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, C. Estimated manufacturing overhead divided by expected operating activity. Explanation: option C is correct because companies calculate a predetermined overhead rate at the beginning of an accounting period to apply manufacturing overhead costs to products or jobs. The formula is estimated total manufacturing. Overhead costs for the period divided by estimated total amount of the operating activity. Option A is incorrect because the calculation uses operating activity, not expected sales. Option B is incorrect because the rate is predetermined using estimates, not actual costs. Option D is incorrect because the rate is predetermined using estimates, not actual costs. 19. What type of costing system would be appropriate for a company producing custom furniture? A. Job order costing. B. Process costing. C. Standard costing. D. Variable costing. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer, A. Job order costing. Explanation. Option A is correct because job order costing is a system used by companies that make products or provide services that are unique for each customer or job. Since custom furniture is made to specific customer orders, and each piece is likely different, job order costing would be appropriate to track all the specific costs for each individual furniture job. Option B is incorrect because process costing is best suited for mass production of identical items, where costs are averaged over a large number of units. Option C is incorrect because standard costing involves using preset standard costs for comparison and control, and can be used with either job order or process costing. It is not a costing system itself. Option D is incorrect because variable costing is a method that only includes variable manufacturing costs in the product costs for internal reporting, and does not determine the type of costing system to use. 20. How are overhead costs treated in an activity-based costing system? A. They are applied based on a single cost driver. B. They are ignored in cost allocation. C. They are allocated based on multiple cost drivers. D. They are allocated only to direct materials. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, C. They are allocated based on multiple cost drivers. Explanation. Option C is correct because in an activity-based costing system, overhead costs are assigned to products based on the activities that drive those costs. Multiple cost drivers are used to allocate overhead more accurately. Option A is incorrect because activity-based costing uses multiple cost drivers, not just a single one, to allocate overhead. Option B is incorrect because overhead costs are a significant part of product costing and are not ignored in activity-based costing. Option D is incorrect because overhead costs are allocated to all products and services that consume the activities, not just direct materials. 21. What is the equivalent units of production used for in-process costing? A. To calculate the number of units completed during the period. B. To calculate total fixed costs. C. To measure the amount of work done during the period. D. To determine labour efficiency. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, C. To measure the amount of work done during the period. Explanation. Option C is correct because when a company uses process costing for mass production of identical items, it often has some units that are fully completed at the end of a period, and some that are only partly finished work in process. Equivalent units of production is a way to express all the work done during the period in terms of fully completed units. For example, if you have 100 units that are 50% complete, that's like having 50 equivalent fully completed units in terms of the work done on them. This helps to accurately assign costs to both finished goods and work in process inventory. Option A is incorrect because calculating the number of units completed during the period is a simpler count. whereas equivalent units account for partially completed items. Option B is incorrect because equivalent units of production are primarily concerned with assigning costs to units of output, not with calculating total fixed costs. Option D is incorrect because determining labour efficiency typically involves comparing actual labour hours to standard labour hours, not equivalent units of production. (22) In job order costing, what is the journal entry to record direct labour costs? A. Debit to manufacturing overhead. Credit to work in process inventory. B. Debit to work in process inventory. Credit to salaries and wages payable. C. Debit to raw materials inventory. Credit to work in process inventory. D. Debit to finished goods inventory. Credit to cost of goods sold. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. B. Debit to work in process inventory. Credit to salaries and wages payable. Explanation. Option B is correct because direct labour costs are the wages of employees who work directly on making a specific product or job and are added to the cost of that job, which is tracked in the work in process inventory account, increasing it with a debit. The company records an obligation to pay employees, a liability called salaries and wages payable, which increases with a credit. Option A is incorrect because debiting manufacturing overhead is used for indirect labour costs, not direct labour. Option C is incorrect because raw materials inventory is used to record the cost of materials used in production, not direct labour. Option D is incorrect because finished goods inventory and cost of goods sold are used when the product is completed and sold, not when direct labour costs are incurred. (23) What is the purpose of activity-based costing? A. To allocate costs more accurately to products or services. B. To reduce the total cost of production. C. To increase the profit margin. D. To decrease direct labour costs. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. A. To allocate costs more accurately to products or services. Explanation. Option A is correct because the main purpose of activity-based costing is to give a company a much more accurate idea of how much its different products or services actually cost to make or provide. It does this by tracing overhead costs to specific activities and then assigning those activity costs to products based on how much each product actually uses those activities. This is often more accurate than traditional methods that just use one simple way to spread overhead. Option B is incorrect because while activity-based costing can help identify areas for improvement that might lead to cost reduction, its primary purpose is cost allocation, not direct cost reduction. Option C is incorrect because while better cost information from activity-based costing can inform decisions that improve profit margins, the method itself doesn't directly increase profit margins. Option D is incorrect because activity-based costing focuses on overhead costs and their allocation, not specifically on decreasing direct labour costs. (24) In a job order costing system, how are manufacturing overhead costs applied to jobs? A. Based on actual overhead costs incurred. B. Using a predetermined overhead rate. C. By directly tracing them to specific jobs. D. By allocating them equally to all jobs. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer. B. Using a predetermined overhead rate. Explanation. Option B is correct because it's usually very hard to know the exact actual manufacturing overhead costs for each specific job as it's being worked on. So in a job order costing system, companies typically use a predetermined overhead rate. At the beginning of the year, they estimate their total overhead costs and some activity level. They divide these to get a rate. Then as each job is worked on, they apply overhead to that job by multiplying this predetermined rate by how much of the activity base that specific job used. Option A is incorrect because actual overhead costs are compared to applied overhead at year end to calculate any over or under applied overhead. Option C is incorrect because it is not possible for indirect overhead costs, which by definition cannot be directly traced to specific jobs. Option D is incorrect because it is too simplistic and inaccurate, as it does not consider the actual resources used by each job. 25. What are direct labour costs in manufacturing? A. Costs of materials used in production. B. Costs of factory rent and utilities. C. Wages of employees working directly on the production of goods. D. Depreciation on machinery. Do you know the answer? The correct answer, C. Wages of employees working directly on the production of goods. Explanation. Option C is correct because direct labour costs are the wages and related payroll costs of the employees who are physically working on making the product, the people on the assembly line, the machine operators who are actually transforming raw materials into finished goods, and their work can be directly traced to specific products. Option A is incorrect because costs of materials are direct material costs, not direct labour costs. Option B is incorrect because factory rent and utilities are part of manufacturing overhead costs, which are indirect costs. Option D is incorrect because depreciation on machinery is also a manufacturing overhead cost, an indirect cost, and not directly tied to labour. 26. What type of cost is depreciation on factory equipment classified as in manufacturing? A. Direct labour. B. Manufacturing overhead. C. Direct materials. D. Selling expenses. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, B. Manufacturing overhead. Explanation. Option B is correct because depreciation on factory equipment is the expense recorded to show that the factory machinery is being used up or losing value over time. Since this equipment is used in the factory to make many different products, and its cost isn't easily traced to just one specific unit, it's considered an indirect cost of production. All indirect factory costs are part of manufacturing overhead. Option A is incorrect because direct labour refers to the wages and benefits paid to workers who are directly involved in the production process, such as assembly line workers. Option C is incorrect because direct materials are the raw materials that become an integral part of the finished product, such as the wood used to make a table. Option D is incorrect because selling expenses are costs associated with marketing and distributing the product, such as advertising and sales commissions. 27. How are over-applied manufacturing overhead costs typically disposed of at the end of a period? A. Debited to cost of goods sold. B. Credited to finished goods inventory. C. Credited to work in process inventory. D. Credited to cost of goods sold. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, D. Credited to cost of goods sold. Explanation. Option D is correct because over-applied overhead means that the company applied more overhead to its jobs or products during the period than the actual overhead costs it really incurred. This difference needs to be corrected at the end of the period. If the amount is not very large, the most common way to dispose of this over-applied overhead is to reduce the cost of goods sold account by crediting it. This makes the reported profit slightly higher. Option A is incorrect because debiting cost of goods sold would be the treatment for under-applied overhead, increasing the cost of goods sold. Option B is incorrect because crediting finished goods inventory might be used if the over-applied amount is large and needs to be spread among inventory accounts and cost of goods sold, but it's not the typical treatment for smaller amounts. Option C is incorrect because crediting work-in-process inventory might also be used if the over-applied amount is large and needs to be spread among accounts, but it is not the typical method for smaller amounts. 28. Which of the following is an example of a cost driver in an activity-based costing system? A. Machine hours used. B. Total sales revenue. C. Number of units produced. D. Total direct labour costs. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, A. Machine hours used. Explanation. Option A is correct because in activity-based costing, a cost driver is an activity or factor that causes a particular overhead cost to happen or to change. If a company has overhead costs related to running its machines, then the machine hours used would be a good cost driver because the more hours the machines run, the higher those machine-related overhead costs will likely be. Option B is incorrect because total sales revenue is a financial outcome, not a direct driver of specific activity costs in ABC. Option C is incorrect because the number of units produced might influence some costs, but ABC seeks more direct links between activities and costs. Option D is incorrect because total direct labour costs, while relevant to production, don't necessarily drive specific overhead activities as precisely as a cost driver in ABC should. (29) When is process costing most appropriately used? A. When producing large volumes of similar products. B. When producing custom-made products. C. When allocating direct labour costs to products. D. When production is completed on a per-job basis. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, A. When producing large volumes of similar products. Explanation. Option A is correct because process costing is a costing system best suited for companies that make huge quantities of products that are all identical or very similar to each other, often in a continuous production flow. Option B is incorrect because producing custom-made products is better suited for job order costing. Option C is incorrect because allocating direct labour costs is a component of cost, not a determinant of the costing system type. Option D is incorrect because when production is completed on a per-job basis, job order costing is more appropriate. 30. What is the role of equivalent units in process costing? A. To measure labour efficiency in production. B. To calculate the cost per unit for unfinished goods. C. To calculate the cost of raw materials. D. To measure the number of finished goods. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer, B. To calculate the cost per unit for unfinished goods. Explanation. Option B is correct because when a company uses process costing, it often has some units that are fully completed at the end of a period and some that are only partly finished. Equivalent units is a way to express all the work done during the period on both finished and unfinished units in terms of fully completed units. This then allows the company to calculate an average cost per equivalent unit, which can be used to assign costs to both the finished goods and the ending work-in-process inventory. Option A is incorrect because equivalent units are not directly used to measure labour efficiency. Labour efficiency variances might use cost data derived from process costing, but equivalent units themselves don't measure efficiency. Option C is incorrect because while raw material costs are part of the overall cost calculation in process costing, equivalent units are used to allocate these costs to finished and unfinished goods, not to calculate the initial cost of the raw materials themselves. Option D is incorrect because equivalent units don't directly measure the number of finished goods. They help to determine the cost of those finished goods and the cost of work in process. 31. In job order costing, which document is used to track the costs of materials, labour, and overhead for a specific job? A. Materials requisition form. B. Job cost sheet. C. Production schedule. D. Bill of materials. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer, B. Job cost sheet. Explanation. Option B is correct because a job cost sheet is like the main report card for each individual job in a job order costing system. All the direct materials used for that job, the direct labour hours worked on it, and their cost, and the manufacturing overhead applied to it, are recorded on this sheet. It shows the total cost of that specific job. Option A is incorrect because a materials requisition form is used to request materials from storage. It doesn't track all costs, just the materials requested. Option C is incorrect because a production schedule shows when jobs are planned. It does not track the actual costs incurred. Option D is incorrect because a bill of materials lists all the parts needed for a product. It doesn't track the actual costs either. (32) In an activity-based costing system, what are cost pools? A. A group of costs incurred due to direct labour. B. A group of costs incurred due to direct materials. C. A collection of overhead costs associated with a specific activity. D. A collection of selling and administrative expenses. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer, C. A collection of overhead costs associated with a specific activity. Explanation. Option C is correct because in activity-based costing, instead of having one big pile of all overhead costs, the company first identifies different activities that cause overhead. Then all the overhead costs that are related to one specific activity are grouped together into a cost pool for that activity. Option A is incorrect because direct labour costs are direct costs, not overhead cost pools. Option B is incorrect because direct material costs are direct costs, not overhead cost pools. Option D is incorrect because selling and administrative expenses are period costs. Activity-based costing primarily focuses on manufacturing overhead, though it can be extended. 33. How are indirect labour costs treated in a manufacturing environment? A. They are included in work in process inventory. B. They are added to the cost of direct materials. C. They are part of manufacturing overhead. D. They are debited to finished goods inventory. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer, C. They are part of manufacturing overhead. Explanation. Option C is correct because indirect labour costs are wages paid to factory employees whose work is necessary for production, but who don't directly work on making the product itself, so you can't easily trace their time to one specific unit. These indirect labour costs are considered part of manufacturing overhead, which is then allocated to products. Option A is incorrect because work in process inventory includes direct materials, direct labour, and allocated manufacturing overhead, but not the labour costs themselves. Option B is incorrect because direct materials are directly traceable to the finished product and do not include indirect labour costs. Option D is incorrect because finished goods inventory represents completed products ready for sale, and indirect labour costs are allocated to products through manufacturing overhead during the production process, not directly debited to finished goods. 34. What is the formula for calculating cost of goods manufactured? A. Beginning work in process inventory plus total manufacturing costs minus ending work in process inventory. B. Beginning finished goods inventory plus cost of goods sold minus ending finished goods inventory. C. Sales minus cost of goods sold plus administrative expenses. D. Direct materials plus direct labour plus overhead. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. A. Beginning work in process inventory plus total manufacturing costs minus ending work in process inventory. Explanation. Option A is correct because the cost of goods manufactured is the total cost of all the products that were completed and moved from the factory floor to the finished goods warehouse during an accounting period. Option B is incorrect because it is a formula to calculate cost of goods sold if inventory levels are known. Option C is incorrect because it does not calculate cost of goods manufactured. Option D is incorrect because it is a calculation of total manufacturing costs for the period, not cost of goods manufactured. 35. What does the term underapplied overhead mean? A. The overhead applied to jobs is greater than actual overhead. B. The overhead applied to jobs is less than actual overhead. C. The company has overspent on direct labour. D. The company has excess raw materials. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer. B. The overhead applied to jobs is less than actual overhead. Explanation. Option B is correct because underapplied overhead happens when the total amount of manufacturing overhead that a company applied or assigned to its jobs or products during a period turns out to be less than the actual overhead costs it really incurred during that same period. So not enough overhead cost was put onto the products. Option A is incorrect because it describes over-applied overhead, where too much overhead was applied to products. Option C is incorrect because it refers to direct labour costs, not overhead costs. Option D is incorrect because it refers to raw materials inventory, not overhead costs. 36. Which of the following is a disadvantage of using activity-based costing? A. It results in less accurate cost allocation. B. It is complex and costly to implement. C. It ignores indirect labour costs. D. It cannot be used in service industries. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer. B. It is complex and costly to implement. Explanation. Option B is correct because while activity-based costing can give much more accurate product costs, a big disadvantage is that it can be very complicated and expensive to set up and maintain. It involves identifying many different activities, finding cost drivers for each, and collecting a lot of data, which can take a lot of time and resources, especially for smaller companies. Option A is incorrect because activity-based costing is usually more accurate than traditional costing methods. Option C is incorrect because activity-based costing specifically tries to allocate indirect costs better. Option D is incorrect because activity-based costing can be very useful in service industries. 37. How does a company apply overhead to work in process in a job order costing system? A. By using actual overhead costs. B. By using a predetermined overhead rate. C. By assigning an equal amount to all jobs. D. By charging the direct materials used. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer. B. By using a predetermined overhead rate. Explanation. Option B is correct because in a job order costing system, it's usually too hard to know the exact actual manufacturing overhead costs for each specific job as it's being made. So companies calculate a predetermined overhead rate at the beginning of the year. Then as each job is worked on, they apply or assign overhead to that job by multiplying this predetermined rate by how much of the activity base that specific job actually used. Option A is incorrect because using actual overhead costs is compared to applied overhead at year end to calculate any over or under applied overhead. Option C is incorrect because assigning an equal amount to all jobs is an inaccurate method for applying overhead as it doesn't consider the resources each job consumes. Option D is incorrect because charging the direct materials used is not how overhead is applied. Direct materials are a separate direct cost. 38. In process costing, how is the cost of units completed and transferred out calculated? A. By multiplying the cost per unit by the number of units completed. B. By summing the cost of direct labour and direct materials. C. By adding beginning inventory and current production costs. D. By using the predetermined overhead rate. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, A. By multiplying the cost per unit by the number of units completed. Explanation. Option A is correct, because in a process costing system, companies first calculate an average cost per equivalent unit for a particular production process or department during a period. This cost per unit includes direct materials, direct labour, and manufacturing overhead. Then to find the total cost of all the units that were fully completed and moved out of that process to the next stage, they simply multiply this cost per equivalent unit by the number of units that were completed and transferred out. Option B is incorrect because summing the cost of direct labour and direct materials calculates prime cost, not the total cost of completed units, as it omits manufacturing overhead. Option C is incorrect because adding beginning inventory and current production costs is part of calculating total cost to be accounted for, not the cost of units completed and transferred out. Option D is incorrect because using the predetermined overhead rate is used to apply overhead, which is only one component of the cost per unit. 39. Which of the following costs is classified as a batch-level cost in an ABC system? A. Quality inspection of finished goods. B. Depreciation of the factory. C. Machine setup for a production run. D. Advertising for a new product. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, C. Machine setup for a production run. Explanation. Option C is correct because in activity-based costing, batch-level costs are incurred every time a company produces a batch of products, regardless of the number of units. Machine setup is required for each batch. Option A is incorrect because quality inspection could be unit level or batch level, depending on how inspections are performed. Option B is incorrect because depreciation of the factory is a facility level cost. Option D is incorrect because advertising is a selling/marketing cost, possibly product level if specific to one product. 40. What is the main advantage of using process costing? A. It provides detailed cost information for custom jobs. B. It simplifies cost allocation for mass production of similar products. C. It accurately traces direct labour to specific jobs. D. It reduces the need for indirect cost allocation. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer, B. It simplifies cost allocation for mass production of similar products. Explanation. Option B is correct because process costing is best suited for companies that make huge quantities of products that are all identical or very similar to each other. The main advantage is that it simplifies how costs are assigned to these products, because you can just collect all the costs for a particular production process or department over a period, and then average those costs over all the many identical units that were produced. This is much simpler than trying to track costs for each individual unit. Option A is incorrect because providing detailed cost information for custom jobs is an advantage of job order costing, not process costing. Option C is incorrect because accurately tracing direct labour to specific jobs is an advantage of job order costing, not process costing. Option D is incorrect because process costing still requires the allocation of indirect costs, although it simplifies the allocation process compared to job order costing. 41. Which of the following is a common measure used to allocate overhead in traditional costing systems? A. Number of products sold. B. Direct labour hours. C. Sales revenue. D. Units produced. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, B. Direct labour hours. Explanation. Option B is correct because in traditional costing systems, companies often need a simple and easy to measure way to spread out their general factory costs to the products they make. A very common allocation base or measure used for this is direct labour hours, how many hours people work directly on making the products. Option A is incorrect because the number of products sold is related to sales, not production overhead allocation. Option C is incorrect because sales revenue is related to sales, not production overhead allocation. Option D is incorrect because although units produced can be used, direct labour hours or machine hours are more common as they reflect activity. (42) In job order costing, what is the journal entry when raw materials are issued to production for use in a specific job? A. Debit work in process inventory, credit raw materials inventory. B. Debit manufacturing overhead, credit raw materials inventory. C. Debit cost of goods sold, credit work in process inventory. D. Debit finished goods inventory, credit work in process inventory. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer, A. Debit work in process inventory, credit raw materials inventory. Explanation. Option A is correct because when a company takes raw materials out of its storeroom to be used in making a specific product or job, the cost of those materials is added to the cost of that specific job, which is tracked in the work in process inventory account, which increases with a debit, and the amount of raw materials inventory decreases with a credit. Option B is incorrect because it is the journal entry for indirect materials used in production, not direct materials used for a specific job. Option C is incorrect because it represents the transfer of costs from work in process to cost of goods sold, indicating that the goods have been completed and sold. Option D is incorrect because it represents the transfer of costs from work in process to finished goods inventory, indicating that the goods have been completed but not yet sold. 43. Which of the following statements is true about job order costing? A. It uses equivalent units to calculate the cost per unit. B. It tracks costs for each individual job separately. C. It is used for mass production of similar products. D. It averages costs over all units produced. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. B. It tracks costs for each individual job separately. Explanation. Option B is correct because job order costing is a system used by companies that make products or provide services that are unique or custom-made for each customer. A key feature is that the company carefully tracks and collects all the costs for each individual job separately. Option A is incorrect because equivalent units are used in process costing, not job order costing, to account for partially completed units. Option C is incorrect because job order costing is used for unique or custom jobs, not the mass production of similar products, which is better suited for process costing. Option D is incorrect because job order costing tracks costs for each individual job, rather than averaging costs over all units produced, as is done in process costing. (44) Which cost category is typically not included in direct product costs? A. Direct materials. B. Direct labour. C. Administrative expenses. D. Manufacturing overhead. Do you know the answer? Correct answer, C. Administrative expenses. Explanation. Option C is correct because direct product costs are costs that can be easily and directly traced to making a specific product. Administrative expenses are period costs related to running the overall business, not making the product. Option A is incorrect because direct materials, like the main ingredients, are direct product costs. Option B is incorrect because direct labour, or the wages of people directly making the product, is a direct product cost. Option D is incorrect because manufacturing overhead, like factory rent or electricity, is an indirect product cost. (45) What's the main purpose of a job cost sheet? A. To summarise total sales for each job. B. To record the amount of time spent on a job. C. To track the direct and indirect costs associated with a specific job. D. To list the raw materials used for production. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer, C. To track the direct and indirect costs associated with a specific job. Explanation. Option C is correct because a job cost sheet is the main accounting document for each individual job in a job order costing system. Its main purpose is to collect and keep track of all the costs that are related to that specific job. This includes direct materials used on the job, direct labour hours worked on the job, and manufacturing overhead assigned to the job. Option A is incorrect because summarising total sales is not the main purpose of a job cost sheet, which focuses on costs, not revenues. Option B is incorrect because recording the amount of time spent on a job is only one aspect of job costing, while the sheet tracks all direct and indirect costs. Option D is incorrect because listing raw materials is only one part of the material cost, and job cost sheets track all costs, not just raw materials. 46. What does the predetermined overhead rate represent? A. The total manufacturing costs for the year. B. The rate used to apply overhead to jobs based on a specific activity base. C. The difference between applied and actual overhead. D. The direct materials cost per unit. What do you think is the answer? Correct answer. B. The rate used to apply overhead to jobs based on a specific activity base. Explanation. Option B is correct because companies usually can't wait until the end of the year to know their exact actual overhead costs to assign to products. So at the beginning of the year, they calculate a predetermined overhead rate. This rate is then used throughout the year to apply or assign a share of the estimated manufacturing overhead costs to each job or product based on how much of a specific activity that job or product used. Option A is incorrect because the predetermined overhead rate is a rate, not the total cost. Option C is incorrect because the predetermined overhead rate is used to apply overhead, and the difference between applied and actual overhead is over or under applied overhead. Option D is incorrect because the predetermined overhead rate concerns overhead costs, not direct materials costs. 47. What happens when overhead is underapplied? A. Actual overhead is less than applied overhead. B. Applied overhead is less than actual overhead. C. The company overestimates the costs of production. D. The company records a higher profit. Can you guess the answer? Correct answer. B. Applied overhead is less than actual overhead. Explanation. Option B is correct because underapplied overhead means that the total amount of manufacturing overhead that a company applied or assigned to its jobs or products during a period turned out to be less than the actual overhead costs it really incurred during that same period. So not enough overhead cost was put onto the products. Option A is incorrect because that describes overapplied overhead. Option C is incorrect because underapplied overhead doesn't necessarily mean the company overestimated costs of production, but rather that they didn't apply enough of the actual overhead costs to the products. Option D is incorrect because a higher profit is a potential consequence before adjustment, but it doesn't define what underapplied overhead is. 48. Which of the following would most likely use a job order costing system? A. A company manufacturing identical water bottles. B. A law firm providing legal services. C. A candy manufacturer producing large quantities of chocolates. D. A gasoline refinery. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. B. A law firm providing legal services. Explanation. Option B is correct because job order costing is used when products or services are unique or provided on a per job or per client basis. A law firm provides customized legal services for each individual client or case. They would need to track the costs like lawyer time and specific expenses for each client's case separately, which is what job order costing does. Option A is incorrect because manufacturing identical water bottles involves making large quantities of very similar products, so they would likely use process costing. Option C is incorrect because producing large quantities of chocolates involves making large quantities of very similar products, so they would likely use process costing. Option D is incorrect because a gasoline refinery involves making large quantities of very similar products, so they would likely use process costing. 49. In a process costing system, what is a key characteristic of how costs are assigned to products? A. Costs are traced to specific products or services. B. Costs are averaged over all units produced during the period. C. Costs are accumulated by each job separately. D. Costs are allocated only to finished goods. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. B. Costs are averaged over all units produced during the period. Explanation. Option B is correct because a process costing system is used by companies that make huge quantities of identical or very similar products in a continuous flow through different production processes or departments. A key characteristic is that the manufacturing costs for each process are collected for a period, and then those total costs are averaged over all the units that pass through that process during the period to get a cost per unit. Option A is incorrect because tracing costs to specific products is a characteristic of job order costing, not process costing. Option C is incorrect because accumulating costs by each job separately is a characteristic of job order costing, not process costing. Option D is incorrect because costs are also assigned to work in process, not just finished goods, in a process costing system. (50) What does the term conversion costs refer to in a process costing system? A. Direct materials and manufacturing overhead costs. B. Direct labour and direct materials costs. C. Direct labour and manufacturing overhead costs. D. Direct materials and administrative costs. Do you know the answer? Correct answer. C. Direct labour and manufacturing overhead costs. Explanation. Option C is correct because conversion costs are the costs a manufacturing company spends to convert raw materials into finished products. These costs include direct labour, which is the wages of people directly working on making the product, and manufacturing overhead, which includes all other factory costs like factory rent, electricity for machines, and salaries of factory supervisors. Option A is incorrect because it is missing direct labour and includes direct materials, which are not part of conversion costs. Option B is incorrect because it represents prime costs, not conversion costs. Option D is incorrect because administrative costs are not part of the manufacturing process, and therefore not included in conversion costs. You have reached the end of our first question set. For the free complete exam preparation, visit our website link in the description, where you find thousands more practice questions and comprehensive study guides. Thanks for studying with us today. See you in the next video.